Do technical experts make the best speakers? Not always, but with the right support, they can. And in this episode of Present Influence, I'm joined by speaking coach and presentation skills expert Mark Robinson. Mark specializes in helping tech professionals and senior leaders transform complex content into clear, confident, and compelling communication. Mark shares the secrets behind making your message memorable, how to avoid detail overload, and why storytelling practice and authentic delivery are essential, even for the most analytical minds. We also dive into stage presence, star moments, and why it's not about being flashy, but about being heard. If you've ever felt like your message gets lost in translation or you want to help your team speak with more clarity and impact, this conversation is very much for you. If you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, please make sure you hit the like and subscribe, and maybe leave us a comment. Let us know if you're enjoying the show. If you are listening to us on audio podcast, do join us on YouTube for sure. But please also make sure you are following the show on your favorite podcast provider so that you don't miss any future episodes. Welcome to Present Influence, the professional speaking show for speakers and communicators who want to impact, influence, and inspire. My name's John Ball, your guide on this journey to mastery level communication skills. I think it's a great privilege for me today to be able to welcome my guest, who is undoubtedly an expert in speaking. Let me welcome Mark Robinson.
Thank you very much, John. And it's an honor to be here. I've seen some of your previous episodes and the guests you've had on. Pretty awesome lineup. Yeah.
I do pretty well for guests. Thank you. For our audience, just say a little bit about the kind of training and work that you do at the moment.
My background, first of all, is in IT. So most of my customers are technical people. And what I do typically, to answer your question, is where I give people practical tips that they can immediately implement. Everything from thinking of your goal, getting that clear, pairing, how you start, how you structure, how you end, how you can have more confidence, how you can add storytelling, how you can use PowerPoint and what you shouldn't do, how you can do online presenting, and how you can make sure your presentation is something which is memorable, that years later people will say, oh, that was that presentation.
I think you've summed that up very well. And just to get a better understanding of that, so you work mostly with people in technical spaces for that training.
Yeah.
Why is it that they particularly need that? And where are they going to be using and applying that?
Mostly they apply it in their work environments. When they speak at conferences, in the last couple of weeks, I've trained two CEOs, one who was presenting to her company and another one who was pitching for a large multi-million investment.
Why do they need this training?
I think the technical people tend to love the details and the products, but they're not necessarily great at understanding the audiences. And so they tend to just go into lots of detail rather than getting to the core message, even getting clear for yourself. What do you want your audience to do as a result of your presentation? And many of us, I include myself in this, don't naturally think of those things. And when we do, our presentations tend to be quite dull.
Do you ever get feedback that this helps them in other parts of their lives with communication as well?
John, when you can present well or confidently in front of a group, then in a one-on-one like we're having now, or even a social setting like a date, a party, anything, you have much more confidence. A job interview, you can be much more confident. So it helps in multiple areas as well. And even like writing articles or writing emails, one of the things I talk about in my workshop is kill your darlings, right? Get rid of all the things you would love to say, but can just be overwhelming your audience. And that principle applies equally to an article, to an email. What's your core message? And get rid of things that don't help your goal.
We've all met those people who spend so long dancing around the topic that they're actually trying to get to that you probably lost interest or tuned out long before they ever get there.
Can I tell you one quick story about that?
Please do, yeah.
A couple of years ago, I was giving a workshop to a number of technicians, but there happened to be a very senior manager in the room as well. When I talked about, when you're in front of senior management, think in terms of headlines, what's the main thing you want to say first, and then keep going into detail if it's requested. Tell them what you want them to do. And when I said this, the senior manager said, thank you. He said, many times engineers come to me and they speak for half an hour. And at the end, I think, what do you want? Why are you telling me all this information? So yeah, just getting that clear is already a big help.
Yeah, it's like giving you all the instructions and technical spec on a rocket when all you really want is a new, I don't know, they don't have steering wheels, I guess, but a new seat or something. Then
Yeah.
let me ask you for yourself. I know you said that when you first were getting up on a stage, you were absolutely terrified.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about that and what made you then push through and continue.
Yeah. Well, thank you, John. That was when I was 13 years old at school. In fact, I talk about that a bit in that TEDx talk, that when I stood in front of my classmates, I was absolutely terrified. 30 unimpressed teenagers all looking at me, and I just felt so self-conscious. I was shaking. I was told later I went totally white, and I was convinced that I would never do that again. It was horrible, traumatizing even. But we had to do it again because at school you have to do that a few times. And then I went on a workshop by a guy who's quite well known in the Netherlands. Then he gave a follow-up workshop about public speaking, called Speaking with Impact. And he explained, to be transparent, he explained the tricks that he does to keep people's attention, keep people listening the whole time. And I thought, wow, apparently I can do it as well. So I just started learning and applying these techniques. And so that is in a nutshell how I went from thinking I couldn't do it to, hey, I can. And if I can, anyone can. Literally anyone can.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way as well. I mean, yes, some people are going to probably be a little more adept than others,
Yeah.
and that's okay. I mean, we all start from different places with these things anyway, and some people might be able to go further than
Yeah.
others with it because they maybe have more of a performance personality that's more just fits better on the stage. But then again, it depends on the kind of speaking you're doing, to the kinds of audience you do, as to what's going to be most effective and most connective for them. For yourself, what's been the kind of speaking work that you've done since then, and how do you feel going up on stage now?
I feel more confident, but I'm still nervous. And I think that's a good thing because a few years ago, I was totally relaxed, way too relaxed in the run up to a presentation. And a couple of days before, I thought, oh, actually, I haven't really prepared well. So I like crammed for 48 hours, making sure I was really well prepared. So I think a bit of nerves can help, and I'm feeling more confident.
That's good to hear. I mean, it's not the level of nerves that you had before you were terrified with the blood
Yes.
straining from your face. So that's good to hear. But I do think a little bit of nerves kind of shows that you care and that you want to do a good job.
Yeah.
But we don't want the level of nerves where you are kind of almost paralyzed or want to run away screaming in tears.
Yeah.
Which I have seen in various speaker trainings I've
Yeah.
done over the years. It does happen. Some people are that terrified.
Indeed. And yet you are a great example of this because you have been able to do stand-up comedy, right?
Yeah.
And that must take even more confidence.
Do you know, can I share with you something about that? Because people do keep asking me about this and like, oh, I couldn't do it, I'm terrified. And that's how I probably felt. And then when I did it, and people saying, aren't you nervous? This is before I'm going up on stage, because you want people to be asking you, are you nervous? Just when you're about to perform, right? But that really helps. But I was like, not that much. I really wasn't. I was a little bit nervous, but I had already framed in my head that the win for me was getting up on stage to do this. And I gave myself permission to bomb. I really did.
Right.
It's like, if I'm terrible, it's okay because I can be better next time. And it kind of helped as well that a few of the people who were up before me in the lineup did bomb.
Right.
And it was okay. The audience was still really supportive. I just thought, this is fine.
Yeah.
Nothing is gonna happen except no laughs, which would be a bit disappointing, but it wouldn't be a failure. So even though people think, oh yeah, he must be terrified, I wasn't. It ended up being a really positive experience. What has terrified me in the past has been competitive speaking. That scares me.
Oh.
That fills me with dread.
So what, you're in a line of people all pitching, or what is that setting?
No. Like doing the Toastmasters World Championship.
Right. Wow.
It was fun, but I found it absolutely terrifying, especially as I got up to higher levels of the competition.
Wow.
And I don't know if I want to do this.
Very good, though. Very good you even did it. That sounds incredible, John.
It's definitely, if people who are into that kind of thing, I think it's a great experience. ultimately I decided it doesn't do, even if you win, it doesn't do that much for you. It's like,
Right.
it's a good accolade, but I just thought it wasn't worth it because I was like, honestly, my heart beating through my chest, the palpitations, the sweat, it was a little too much. And I don't get that when I'm doing keynotes, when I'm doing stand-up
Right.
comedy, it's like,
Right. Yeah.
let's stick to that.
And if I may give a tip to your listeners, one thing that I think makes the single biggest difference for confidence is practice.
Right.
And I probably practice at least 10 times any presentation. The first 5 times I'm just getting the story right, because I don't know about you, but the very first time I give any presentation at home, it's terrible, really, really awful. And I think second time is slightly less bad and so on. And I'm so glad that I don't go live with my first draft, because that would not be a success. And then the last 3 times, I'm just making sure I know it. So when I'm in front of the audience, I get my notes because I know it.
And you and I probably both know from people we've worked with that most people are finishing their first draft the night before, right?
Yeah, I know.
Which is not the best time to do it, and to try, and then you've got no real time to practice it, and you end up going up on stage winging it. But I tend to go with the idea that how we do anything is how we do everything. Not all the time, not with everything, but
Right.
Generally, it's like, if you're the kind of person who crammed for your exams and stressed out the whole time you're in there, you're probably going to do the same tactic with something like this as well. And it's not great. It's not great. So we don't recommend it. What would be your recommendations for people to practice that? How could you help people like set up and schedule a good level of practice that would have them ready to go?
Yeah. So I think it depends on a number of factors, like how well you know the topic, how much you need to research and so on. So it will vary for me from anything from 2 weeks to 2 months in advance. I start thinking about it. I will typically do a mind map. So first of all, think about the goal, what I want to achieve. And then my tip is I think about the 3 H's. The head, what should people remember? 1, 2, or 3 things. The heart, how do you want them to feel? Which is usually inspired or excited. Something that leads to the final H, which is the hands, the actions, what you want people to do as a result. Because if there's no call to action, doesn't matter what you're talking about. Talk about your holiday. It makes no impact on the world. So head, heart, and hands, get that clear first of all.
Cool. Do you create a little stage area to practice, or how do you set that up?
Oh, I just practice at home on my dining room table with my notes as Post-its, or a bit later on in A4 sheets, just big writing. And each time I do it, I update the notes as I'm changing the content and improving and maybe changing the order. So I just practice usually in front of an empty room. Sometimes if it's an important presentation, I'll practice in front of my wife because she also gives training in presentation skills. One quick story about that. Before I left ASML, I gave a presentation to 20 senior managers and I practiced in advance. It was a 10-minute presentation. So I practiced at home in front of my wife. And I said to her, what do you think? She said, that was great, but can you please stop doing that thing with your hands? I said, what thing? She said, you kept doing this. So for the listeners, I'm clenching my hands together. And I kept doing that throughout the presentation. And she said, so that was good to get feedback on body language as well. I don't record myself because do you know how many people in the world like watching themselves being recorded? Zero, pretty much.
Not many.
No. So I don't record myself, but I do get feedback from other people. And if it's, as I say, if it's important, I'll get feedback from more people as well.
Yeah. I was over years, I do record myself because I've edited so much video of myself that it just doesn't bother me anymore. I'm very over it.
Very good. Yeah.
I don't think about it. But I know most people don't enjoy hearing the sound of their own voice, or but I'm very used to how I sound outside of my own body now, if that makes sense, and how I look from an external perspective. So it bothers me less. But still, even then, I would rather have one of my coaches take a look at the video and give me feedback, because I can't be objective enough about myself.
Yeah, there's 2 things I want to pick up on what you just said. First of all, you record yourself, you're used to it. That's a great thing because you're right. As you do it more, you get more used to it and it becomes less of an issue. So that's really nice that you said. You also said you have coaches. So you're a professional speaker, but you also have coaches, like a professional golfer also has a coach. So can you talk about that? Who do you have? What happens?
Look, I've had so many coaching experiences over the years that I have an amazing network of people who are friends and coaches. So some of them we connect with and coach regularly. Some of them are incredibly good speakers who I can go to and say, hey, look, can we do a bit of work on this? Can you take? But I also get the opportunity to have coaching regularly on this show from
Yeah,
people like yourself who have great expertise. And, as much as we may even work in similar areas, the stuff that I don't, the stuff I know that
sure.
you don't, it's like, so
Yeah,
always learning, always getting development. But also sometimes it means, I don't know, connect with people. Sometimes you really click and that you stay
yeah,
in touch and you can give each other coaching or go to them and say, hey, would you coach me on this for a bit? So yeah, done some of that. I've worked with world champions. I had a coach who's world champion in public speaking with Toastmasters as well. Back, it's all the stuff that helps you progress faster.
yeah. Can I tell you one quick story about that? So
Yeah.
when I gave the workshop at my local university, what I'm saying is it's very important to pick the right coach.
Yeah.
When I gave a workshop at my local university, see, on my workshop, I only give positive feedback, and the students are not used to that. They're used to being criticized by their professors very hard. And I said to them, they said, our professors, they attack our presentations. I said, okay, how good are your professors at presenting? They're terrible, they said. And yet they're the ones giving the criticism. So it's very important, as you're doing, to pick really good coaches. Otherwise, you're going to get the feedback you get could actually harm more than help.
I like that. And I often say this to people about groups like Toastmasters, that it will help people who are getting started. But
Right.
unless you can find a club that has experienced speakers in it, it may be hard to progress further, because you're not going to get the feedback and the encouragement, and you're not going to see and be able to model the more advanced
Yeah.
speakers if they're not in your group, if they're not in your
Yeah.
club. So, well, I couldn't say Toastmasters can't do that. Some clubs can, some clubs can't. So
Sure.
that's why, exactly that point, you have to get feedback from the right people and the kind of feedback that's actually going to help you to grow and develop and encourage. So I
Yeah.
like that. I like
And you mentioned an interesting word. You said about encouragement as well. And that's also super important, not just to hear what you did wrong, but also what you did well. Because as I say on my workshop, I say, when I talk about only positive feedback, they say, but why'd you do that? I say, well, who's our worst critic? And they all say, yeah, it's ourselves. Exactly. I often see this. People, after they've given their presentation on my workshop, they will go back to their chair saying, oh, I didn't do that right. I didn't do that right. And I say, well, yeah.
You're reminding me of a speaker training I did early to mid 2000s, where we weren't supposed to give negative feedback to anybody in the group.
Right.
And one guy said, I got loads of feedback for you, but it's loads of negative. We're not allowed to give it. And so I said, let's go outside because I really want to hear it, because not the kind of person who takes it personally. And it was all really good feedback, but it wasn't constructive feedback. But the trainer overheard what we were doing and he nearly got kicked out of the training. So you got to be careful.
Was that a Dale Carnegie course?
It wasn't.
Okay.
I don't want to say who it was because the guy's
it's okay.
the guy's not in business anymore, and there's good reasons for that.
Yeah.
But to leave it there. But let me ask you, I have a book on advanced presentation skills.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, what constitutes advanced presentation skills, and how does somebody know when they're ready, when they've got enough foundation to be ready for that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. What's the difference between basic and advanced? Some of the things people just don't even think about anyway. So, I mean, like at a basic level, some people don't even get. And these are people who are, as I say, like CEOs or very smart people who wouldn't do anything without having a clear goal except presentations. So getting some things like that is a basis. Then the next level is making sure as soon as you start speaking, you grab people's attention. How do you do that? One way is what I'm doing right now, isn't it? I'm just asking questions, aren't I? So that's one easy way to grab people's attention. That's kind of the next level. And then the really advanced things are tricks with body language. For example, short story, I was giving a workshop to another technical company, and there was a lady from Iran there, and that's important for the story. And she said, we get products from our suppliers, and I'm gesturing to my right now for the people listening. We put it in our warehouse, gesturing to my center. And then when we get an order from our supplier, we deliver it to the customer, gesture to the left, to my left. That was brilliant, but that's different to what most Westerners would do. Most Westerners would say, for example, if I say sales are increasing, I'm gesturing from my bottom left to my top right, which For the audience, when our past is normally, we think of the past on our left, means it's kind of going back in time. So you've always got to mirror things when you're in front of an audience. And this lady from Iran does that because, of course, with the Farsi or Persian, they write from right to left. So for her, the past is on the right. So in a nutshell, that's an example of one of the more advanced tricks, which when you've got the rest in place, then you can think about.
Yeah. So that's like, I've heard it called temporal anchoring on the
Right.
stage. We'll go with that because it sounds like
Yeah,
you've heard that
nice.
as well.
Yeah.
And so is understanding where things are timeline wise when you're presenting,
Yes.
which is just as important on video as it is
Yeah.
on the stage as well. But it does, I don't know, I still find it gets confusing working in mirror image, that you do have to think about it and train
Yeah.
it a bit, which maybe is where the practice part comes in for that as well.
Yeah.
Because it makes a difference where you're standing as well, right? So, you know, if the left audience left of the stage is the past for them, and you're talking about things in the past, it makes sense to be there. And the same with the right hand side if that's the future. So,
Or you can use your hands when you're in a conversation like this. You just use your hands. But that's also important. When I'm going to give a presentation, I will always arrive early to check out the setup. And if possible, get photos in advance. So I can already start to think exactly what you're saying, John. Where would I want to stand when I'm talking about this? Get an idea of the setup already.
yeah. Another thing maybe is then you talked a little bit about hand movements, and it's something that I think some people end up being very conscious of, but there's also a lot of unconscious movement as well, which you talked about with the thing with the hand clasping, and nearly everyone has got some kind of unconscious body movement they tend to do, especially when those nerves are creeping up a little bit. What's your advice for getting that under control and having more volition with your movement?
Well, one thing that I don't do, and I learned this from Scott Adams, the guy who used to do the Dilbert cartoons. One thing that he says is don't draw attention to those kind of physical tics. If you do, say, hey, you're doing this, don't do that. Often the tic will just move somewhere else because it's a symptom of nerves. So I think the biggest thing is what we talked about is increase your self-confidence. One way to do that is, as we talked about, practice, 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 even practice for a particular presentation, but also, of course, the more presentations you give, the easier it gets. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And then another tip for hands is, best tip I've ever heard is just forget about them. Don't think about them, because then they'll move naturally. And that's the best you can do.
I'm kind of there with that, except you do see a lot of people doing strange things with their hands sometimes when they're presenting. And I always fear that so long as you get that picked up somewhere and do something about it, because it does end up being a distraction.
So that's what I did when I practiced in front of my wife and got found out. That really helped.
I always say it's interesting you say that, because I know Darren Brown, the mentalist Darren Brown, he has a tic, which is the sort of head nod thing, which works very well for him with the kind of thing he does with the mentalism. And that's what he's done. He hasn't tried to change it or stop it. He lets it work for him in a way. And so, I think sometimes we can be okay with that and just not focus on it and just get on with the job you went to do. But if you like, I think you're a bit like me, you like to talk with your hands a bit and gesticulate. I think so long as we don't go over the top with that, it can be very effective and really helps to punctuate what we're talking about. And interesting enough, I'm going to try and remember the lady's name now. Vanessa Van Edwards, do you know her? Very interesting lady, some great books on human behavior and stuff. And one of the things she says is that research shows that people feel more trusting, more calm if they can see the palms of your hands. So they can see your hands, especially when you're in video, but especially when they can see the palms of your hands. I guess it's some sort of ancient psychological thing about not being a threat, but being able to see your hands, particularly the palm of your hands, is apparently quite a significant thing. So,
that's a good tip.
Worth checking out her books. She's a very, very interesting lady. Let me see then. Come up to presentation skills, advanced presentation skills. What else really helps us to be that bit more professional and progressed when we're on the stage?
I think one of the other things is, and again, people don't often think about this, particularly in the technical world, is storytelling. If you tell a story, then people will remember your message for a long time to come. You make a natural connection with your audience. They love to hear it. One of the things I say in my workshop is it's great for keeping attention. No child has ever, when it has been taken to bed, has said, can you please give me a PowerPoint presentation? No, they want to hear a story, right? So a PowerPoint presentation would probably send them to sleep faster, but they want to hear a story. So I think storytelling is very important. And how I train people in my workshop is I say, simply remember the 3 Ps. Stories have to be personal, so preferably talk from your own experience. Talk about the second P is a problem, something you encountered. And then what keeps our attention is how you resolve that. And then finally, the point or the purpose. Why are you telling it? And one phrase I find particularly helpful is, so what I learned is, and by saying that phrase, then you round up your message, your story with your main message.
I tend to agree that I encourage people to tell more personal stories than anything else. I certainly encourage people to stay away from those parabolistic stories that speakers use. I've talked about that.
I heard that from the last one. Absolutely.
So we talked about that with Danny Bressel. He hates that as well. But if you've ever been to, if you're a speaker, you probably hear a lot of people speak, and you go to a lot of talks, and the fact that there are very well paid and experienced speakers who use these makes people think it's okay. Well, that's a great story.
Yeah,
they're great. They're illustrative, but they're just overused. But personal stories aren't. But I think I would say you probably can sometimes get away with stories that are about other people as well.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? If it's from your own perspective as well?
That's important what you just said. So why are you telling that story? What does it mean to you? Why are you shaking? You could say, so I found this particularly inspiring and then you introduce your own story, why it affected you.
I always think storytelling probably is one of the most powerful tools that we have. And I know there are people who specialize just in training storytelling, and I can completely understand why. For me and what I do, and maybe similarly for you as well, it's just a part. It's a part of the bigger picture because there is so much more. But I think those basic storytelling skills are essential. What do you do if you get someone who comes along, because I'm sure you've had this, where they say, I haven't got any stories, can't think of anything, I'm not interested, or something like that?
I use some persuasion tricks throughout my workshop, and one simple one I do is peer pressure, but in a very natural way. And by the way, some people say, I don't feel it's ethical. I think it's ethical when it's in their benefit. So I'm not doing it for my benefit, but for them. So how it works is, on the workshop, I give them, talk a bit about storytelling. I first of all show a video, then talk about how you can do it and why you should tell stories. Then I say, now we're going to take 2 minutes in silence to think of story we could share with this criteria. So it's personal, your experience, problem you encountered, and your point. So what I learned is, and I give them a couple minutes to think, and I say, okay, now who's first? So I always let people themselves volunteer on my work. So someone will say, I'll go first. And then they start. And then someone else goes next. Then let's say you're the 9th or 10th out of the 10 people in the room. By the time the 7th or 8th has spoken, you're thinking, everyone else has done it except me. And then I think there's only been one person in the thousands of people I've trained who said, I really can't think of a story. Everybody comes up with a story by the end.
We've all got the stories inside us. I'm of the mind that mostly we need the prompts to help us remind ourselves what those stories are. Incredibly helpful.
And when they've heard the other people, that triggers them to think, oh, yes, I got something. Yeah.
I think there's something innate in storytelling that we relate ourselves into the story, and we do start thinking about times in our own life that are similar or comparable to the story we heard. We can't help but relate into the story. So it's a very powerful tool. How would you advise people to use storytelling in their presentations? Because we don't want to just have a whole story for like 45-minute keynotes. So what do you, and how do we structure that in?
So first of all, how many stories you should use? I would probably use one short story every roughly 5 minutes. So it could be 2 minutes every 10 minutes, but roughly every 5 minutes, because then you have the attention resets with the stories, because everyone loves it. If you start by saying, let me tell you about something that happened to me 2 years ago, which completely changed my life. As soon as you say that, everybody in the room is listening. So that's how often. When you should do it, I mean, you can start with a personal story. One thing that I do also mentioned in my TED talk, there is a few different points, a few different ways you can structure your talk. For example, you want to talk about a problem and a solution, and then you can talk about how you discovered that issue, what happened, what went wrong, and then the cause. I mean, even a story, hey, my first day at work was a complete disaster because all of the last project I did was great because, and then you tell a story.
What about if we want to tell stories, but we don't necessarily have personal relevant experience to the point that we want to make? How can we still tell a story in that
Yeah.
situation?
So well, my initial reaction is to push back and say, hey, let's think about that. Why are you giving this message? What's the relevance to you? And then we start thinking, oh, yeah, there is an experience I could relate. So that's what I would initially do. But as you said, you can always talk about other people. I don't make up stories, just to be clear, because I feel I want to be authentic. And also, if you're being inauthentic, your confidence level goes down. So I always talk about person stories. And I might refer to stories of other people. Like I say, this person said to me, so and so. If I have their permission, then I can repeat someone else's story as well. At the very far end are the ones you talked about earlier, the parables, the ones that everyone uses, or a famous story. I do mention those from time to time, but then a lot less often.
When I some while back, I trained to be a stage trainer, and it was different to how I thought it was going to be, because I knew there was a lot of stories. And I think some part of me maybe guessed as well, because it was a very particular kind of training for a particular company. Those stories had to be the stories that the other trainers told.
Right.
You
Right.
could put your own spin on them,
Mm,
but they had to be the same stories in
yeah,
essence. So they were never your personal stories. And I always felt that that was somewhat damaging
definitely.
to your authenticity,
Yes.
especially if you train that into yourself in the long term, that finding your own authenticity again after that, where you kind of you maybe get to a point where you get pretty good at faking the authenticity on it, is not a healthy way to proceed as a
Yeah,
storyteller.
indeed. This relates very well to the topic you talked about in your last podcast, where you kind of gave a monologue for 20 minutes about being authentic, being your authentic self. Very, very important, John. And that's one reason why I couldn't follow a set standard from a well-known company, for example, say, hey, Mark, go and do this presentation skills workshop, because it wouldn't be authentic to me. Authenticity is so important, and it really increases your confidence as well. You don't need to look to your notes when you're telling a story. Hey, what did I do next? Because you know the stories. You can speak it confidently. It's
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that I see lots of other people who've gone through that kind of pathway, and they do lack a degree of connection
Yeah,
with their audiences. To
yeah,
me, at least, it seems that way. It was my perspective, but they don't seem to have the warmth and connection that somebody who's really being truly themselves and natural
yeah.
and not putting on a personality from the stage can do. That said, as well, I still think there's a level of curation in what we show on stage to what we don't as well.
Yeah. The online kind of cursal things, people have ups and downs, and what they tend to show online is everything above a certain level, which
Yeah.
is, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but also, we're not gonna air our dirty laundry or pull the
yeah.
skeletons out of the closet just because we're on a stage being authentic.
There's like a level that you think, no, that's not for public consumption. Yeah.
It makes sense. I think we probably do all have the experience of it, and let me know if you agree or not with this, but we are not exactly the same in every situation we're in.
Yeah.
We're not exactly the same in the office as we are at home. We're not necessarily
Yeah.
the same with our parents as we are with our friends. And so we show up a little differently in different social situations, but they're still versions of us. And I think it's
Yeah.
finding that version of you for the stage that's going to connect well with the audience, but also not undermine yourself or your credibility whilst you're up there.
I think that's a very good point, because we all have labels, right? Son, father, husband, whatever it is. But though, and those all have different sides of us. You're absolutely right. And on stage, you may show a different side of you, but it's still you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tom. Yeah.
What are your thoughts about presence and charisma on stage? Is there anything you teach relating to that?
I think part of it we've talked about. So practice is super important. Then you have more presence, and also what we talked about, your storytelling and being authentic is super important. One thing I think it will make a big difference to your presence, or making sure people remember, this is another advanced technique, is something called a star moment. It's something they'll always remember. And when you can do that, then you come across much more confidently, which also increases your presence. So an example of a star moment is you can do something unusual, like Steve Jobs, for example, demonstrating the iPhone and using it on stage and showing how powerful it was, calling to pizza to 4,000 people or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. That's a powerful moment. You can draw something. There's a very good TED talk about how to do drawings on flip charts and things. That's what I also teach in my workshop, and I make use of it myself. You can get the audience to do something. I remember one time on my workshop, there was a technical leader, and she said to everyone, okay, everyone come to the middle, because the tables were in a U form. We all came to the middle, and she pointed to one person and said, you're the team leader. Get them all to stand 1.5 meters apart. So this person was moving us all around. It took about 1.5 minutes. She said, okay, now all come back together. We all came back together. She said, now you're a self-organizing team. Stand 1.5 meters apart. And within 5 seconds, we'd all done it. So you can do something unusual. You can draw something. You can get your audience to do something. You can show something as well. Like something prop we would call under a cover. If that's on stage and you talk about it without revealing it, that immediately keeps people's attention. One simple example, I went to the pitch evening. There was a student who came on stage with a carrier bag, plastic carrier bag. It looked like he'd just come from the supermarket. He plonked it on the desk and he started giving his pitch. And I thought he looked so unprofessional. But his topic was sustainable housing. And he started taking out from the bag different ingredients which came from the supermarket, which are used in sustainable housing. It was brilliant. So that's some examples of increasing your stage presence with a star moment.
Yeah, I like that. I like the mystery box kind of thing,
Yeah.
the eliciting curiosity. Definitely good ways of doing it. So that's one of the ways in which we can make our presentations more memorable. I'm sure you have plenty of others that you teach people as well. I certainly hope people will come and check you out. I'm very keen to take the quiz because I need to know how good I am. But I really appreciate everything we've talked about today. It's been a really interesting conversation. I feel like I've learned something, and I hope our listener has as well. And so just let's say thank you, Mark, for coming and speaking with us on Present Influence today.
Well, thank you very much, John. You've had some great guests on, so I'm very privileged to be one of them. Thank you, John.
Happy to add you to the list. Well, for me, and I hope for you too, that was a brilliant chat with Mark Robinson, jam-packed with practical tools, relatable stories, and real-world presentation wisdom. If you took away one thing today, let it be this. Great speakers aren't born, they're built. Through practice, feedback, and a little bit of courage, even the most nervous communicator can become a confident presenter. Now, if you'd like to learn more about Mark or his presentation skills quiz, check out the links in the show notes. And if Present Influence is helping you sharpen your speaking and communication game, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, keep showing up, keep speaking up, and keep influencing. See you next time.